Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor, where we're all just trying to survive in a rough world.
So, Karm, how are you?
Great.
We've been so convivial with each other off camera. So nice to see you. You know, in the hecticness of our father, who unfortunately had to go to the hospital and is doing well now, and switching studios, I almost forgot to mention my new swag. You see this? What does this say?
Yes, surviving the survivor.
And I know people out there are jealous. On the back, it says surviving in a rough world. We are no longer just a podcast. We are a global brand. And we also now have our website up at survivingthesurvivor.com. And very soon we will have a store there where the
group is
the plebeians, the small
no,
people.
Au contraire. Don't say that. That's what Lauren Bacall said.
Lauren Bacall. Remember, I worked with Steve Bogart.
Yeah, once she mentioned that, and she was never forgiven. Never.
I worked with.
And what about deplorables? The deplorables.
I worked with Steve Bogart, who's Humphrey Bogart's son and Lauren Bacall's son. I worked with him at CNBC in 1996.
You see, I remember.
And he said, "My mother calls them the little people." So now our little people can get our shirts and hats.
I would call them my adored audiences.
My lovely fans and your fans, Karm, can get our hats now at survivingthesurvivor.com and shirts. And by the way, we are starting to get noticed. The Miami Herald is going to do a piece on us. The Sun Sentinel, which covers all of Broward County and Donald Trump's home in Palm Beach.
Okay, I have a question for you.
For some random reason, a magazine in Baltimore is about to do a feature on us.
What does Roy say?
Roy says that and $1.50 will get you on a subway.
He doesn't remember that the price went up, but at that time he would say that and $1.50 will get you on the subway.
By the way, do you have any idea how much a stamp costs these days?
I don't know because they are forever.
Yeah, I don't really know either.
I think they're probably 59 cents by now.
I was reflecting on the fact that you can send an envelope for under $1 from Miami to rural Alaska, and it will get there for under $1.
It's questionable if it will get there.
So don't ever say that the federal government.
The Russians may attack Alaska before.
Karm, we have a unique guest on the main Schmooze today. He is a Miamian now, from Wisconsin, I believe, originally.
But he lived in Manhattan.
In Manhattan. He is the former CEO of the Miami Marlins baseball team. A little guy named Derek Jeter took his job, and his name is David Samson, who's running Major League Baseball teams in his 20s, I believe, all the way through his 50s. He's very opinionated. He's an athlete.
Well, the first thing is to say that we heard through the grapevine that he's very bright.
He's very bright.
Very direct, very outspoken.
And he will help propel Surviving the Survivor to the peak, to the Mount Everest of podcasts. We'll be right back.
I always have to just make this remark once, that Joel has a very rich fantasy life.
His name is David Samson. Look him up, Google him, know him, and it's going to be hilarious because Karm's about to talk baseball. Be right back.
Do you want to help my son? His company, Content Partners Media, specializes in brand video and content creation for innovative companies and others. Please go to www.contentpartnersmedia.com and hire him. I repeat, please go to www.contentpartnersmedia.com.
Welcome back to Surviving the Survivor. It's time now for the main Schmooze.
Karm, Mickey Rivers. Who is he?
Okay. I have no idea. It's a baseball player.
You are terrified about this episode because you're afraid you won't be able to speak, which is your favorite That's your national pastime.
Definitely.
Mickey Rivers
and
is
international.
Mickey Rivers. I just got my 2.5-year-old son, and this is not that easy to do. An autographed Mickey Rivers baseball, number 17, my favorite Yankee of all time. 1978, Dad took me to a game. He hit a leadoff home run against Kansas City Royals. I'm 52. I will never forget it. Today, we have a man who knows more about baseball, Major League Baseball, than pretty much anyone on planet Earth. You excited for this, Karm?
Yes, definitely.
His name is David Samson. David, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Do you prefer David or Dave?
Oh, I prefer David, but the truth is you can call me anything you want.
Okay, awesome.
So let's be the first.
So let's tell the audience a little more. David Samson is a timely guest for a lot of reasons. He's the former president of the Miami Marlins baseball team from 2002 to 2017. And David is only about a year older than me, so he was obviously doing a whole lot more at a lot younger age than me, who was chasing girls and making no money. David was busy doing, maybe chasing women, but definitely making a lot more money than me. He was the CEO of the Miami Marlins until 2017, when a little-known player named Derek Jeter, one of the great... Have you heard of Derek Jeter, Karm?
I could swear that the few times that you took me to the Yankee games, I could swear that I know him.
You do know Derek Jeter. He's one of the greatest Yankees of all time.
I was going to get witnesses to sign for me, but it was too late.
Well, we don't love Derek Jeter because he actually fired David Samson, our guest. But ironically, Derek Jeter just this past week, or maybe last week, was fired himself. So karma comes full circle. As they say, karma is a bitch. Samson was also the executive vice president with the Montreal Expos from 1999 to 2002. Do the Montreal Expos still exist, Karm?
No, they became American.
The Washington Nationals, very good. He was working in both cities under team owner and his former stepfather, Jeffrey Loria, who's a very well-known art dealer. Samson won a World Series with the Marlins in 2003, defeating my beloved New York Yankees. And David Samson, is also a survivor, Karmela, but a survivor of a different sort. He was on the TV show Survivor, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Cagayan, back in 2014. Ironically, I know another survivor contestant, Dr. Sean Caniff, who lives here in Miami, who's a doctor. I used to work with him at CBS 4, my first time working at CBS 4. He was on the first season of Survivor, Sean Caniff, and he came in, I think, in top 4, famous for being a neurosurgeon and having nipple rings, Karm. David Samson is currently the host of the podcast Nothing Personal on the CBS Sports Network. And Karmela is absolutely terrified of this episode because, again, as I said, she's afraid she will not be able to talk. David, how are you?
I'm good, but let me just be clear that I was a survivor for 42 minutes in one episode. I was the first one voted off, and believe me, it was not a hardship. So it is so nice to be on the show, and I must tell you, I review a movie. I watch a movie every single day, and I review a movie on my show, Nothing Personal, and I just watched and reviewed in the last week or so a movie called Misha and the Wolves. Do you know that movie?
I started watching that, actually, and got sidetracked by my 3 kids. Karmela, do you know what that's about?
No.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that, David.
You know how painful it is for me to say that I don't know something?
No, I did, because I joked with you. I joke with Karmela that maybe she's a fake survivor. It's about a survivor who made up a story. And I wanted to make sure that wasn't the case with you, Karm. But isn't that right, David?
Actually, I'm only 52.
By the way, you look 52. You look terrific.
Thank you, darling.
It's about a Holocaust survivor who made up a story about being a Holocaust survivor, which, of course, is of great offense to people who are Holocaust survivors. It's a fascinating documentary. So if you haven't seen it, you should check it out.
I didn't hear the first This is a what that made up
So she's not a survivor,
No, wait
correct?
a sec.
Did she embellish a story, or she's not a survivor at all?
She's not. She was not. She lived in Germany. She was not Jewish, and she was not a Holocaust survivor at all. She lived in Germany during the time of the Holocaust, and her dad was actually someone, I don't want to give away the movie, but no, she made up the entire story of how she walked east to freedom for years and joined a pack of wolves, literal wolves, who helped her survive, and it all became a huge deal. She was going to go on Oprah as the Book of the Month Club with this story, and then it turned out all to be a fraud, and I take such great offense to that, not just because I'm Jewish, but just because that issue of people making up sort of the atrocities or being a part of the atrocities is insulting to those people who actually had to survive the atrocities, and of course to the memory and the blessing of the millions who did not.
You know, my takeaway from this, David, is that you watch a movie every day. My mother repeatedly, I'm 52, yells at me. My escape from life is true crime. I'm like I've seen every Dateline episode ever produced. I mean, she calls me a quote unquote hollow head, but she's like, why are you wasting your time? Why are you waiting? And
Wait a minute.
You've got a guy here.
He's not watching true crime. He's watching art.
Yeah.
I was a movie addict for, out of the 82 years, I would say 60, I was a movie addict.
This guy's a business
Then the
executive, a
movies-
triathlon. He's doing very well for himself, and he's watching movies.
No, but
to relax.
he watches them for the artistic value, for their significance, for what trends in the United States, what are people into. You are watching it for the gore.
Why do you watch a movie every day? Is it escapism, or you just enjoy film, or?
I've always loved movies. Because I've always loved the fantasy of movies, and I've always wanted them to be what's real. So when I watch a romantic comedy and see people, I want there to be a happy ending. I want there to be love, and that's the love that I always wanted to find or always wanted to be a part of. Because if it happens in the movies, that means it must be real. And in terms of time allocation, my biggest issue is I don't sleep. So I am a absolute insomniac. I probably sleep, about 2 hours a night, and that's it. And so instead of just staring at the ceiling being despondent, I'm efficient. So I'll watch a movie, or I'll read, or I'll work, and that it doesn't zap me of energy, actually. So for a living, I'm behind a microphone, and I'm always high energy. I'm really never tired. Though by the end of the week, I must tell you, my voice starts to go, but I drink a lot of tea, you'd be pleased to know. Mom, can I call you Mom? Because it just makes me feel so good.
Mom?
Absolutely.
You would be the first one. It would be a historic first. If you know me better, you wouldn't want me to be your mom.
Well, I guess it's all comparative. But that said, that I love my Jewish mother too. I would just tell you that there's a lot of time in the day to do what you want to do. When people say to me in the business world, or even in my personal life, when someone says, I didn't have time, or I don't have time to do something, I never take that as a good excuse, because you may have chosen not to do something, but you definitely have time to do it.
Ta-da! This is what I preach.
This is what you preach.
No, I tell you, I have this theory. This is just Karmela's theory, that men, unfortunately, have a more difficult time multitasking.
Oh, here we go.
And my son laments more than he multitasks.
Sexism in 2020, reverse sexism.
It's time for reverse sexism.
In 2020. So, David, real quick, what time do you go to bed, if I may ask?
Well, it depends, but I would say I get into bed, let's say at 1 o'clock, and I'm usually out of bed, certainly doing something at 3. I think the worst invention of my life that has caused me the greatest pain is my cell phone. And is my electronic device, because I sleep with it next to my bed, which I shouldn't, and that's a violation. My therapist, everybody tells me not to do that, but I'm always afraid of missing something. And once I look at it, I cannot get my brain to slow down. And that's really the reason I don't sleep, is that my brain is always thinking about the next day's show, or what I have to do the following day, or what points I'm trying to make, or what I'm trying to accomplish. And I have this unbelievable urge to accomplish a lot, because I believe that life is so fleeting, and there's one thing I can't buy. There's a million things I can't buy, but there's the one thing I can't buy and that I can't control. I'm a type A control guy, is time. It is the only commodity that everyone is in the same place. It is the equalizer. The ultimate equalizer is time, and I don't want to waste any of it.
And wait, when you are 82, it equalizes even more.
David, my father, God bless him, is 88. He just had heart valve replacement last week.
We speak in unison now.
Last week, but he gets very offended. So my dad only used to worry about money, which is the stage I'm at.
He was a Depression era kid.
My dad was a physician. He was a retired psychiatrist, which is why I'm kind of crazy. But he only worried about money because he saw people selling apples in carts in the Bronx in the 30s and 40s. And now, if you use the expression, I'm killing time, he gets enraged because
he should.
Because he says he only has so much time left.
You don't need to kill time. It's dying on its own.
Yep.
100%. So that's
So David, before we get into...
I wanted to ask something.
Go for it, Karm.
This, nothing personal. Is this daily?
Yes. It is a daily show wherever you get your podcasts. It's also on video if you want to see
I watched, but I didn't realize it was daily. You know, I try to catch up with total ignorance of baseball. Total ignorance. I have a funny story later. Because Joel didn't hear it. But I try to catch up because I'm also competitive. So I try to, get as much information in 3 days as I could. So anyway, if I BS something, it's because I just picked it up.
The show is about baseball, but I also talk about culture and politics and entertainment. And I try to give people a behind the scenes look as to what's happening in the sports and business world. I try to explain that when people meet the media and give press conferences, they don't always say what they mean. They don't always mean what they say. As I said, I review a movie, but I'll also give you my view of what's going on in Russia and the Ukraine. And I'll talk about, the abortion laws in Texas. I will try to really inform people so they can make their own decision. I really don't give you my political views. Sometimes I do. I think people sort of know where I am, but I'm very interested in talking about anti-Semitism and all things that are personal to me. And the show has really grown in a way that I wouldn't have expected. And it manifests itself because when it first started, the bosses at CBS had their finger on the button every show. And they'd be calling me during the show. And they'd say, you can't talk about that, or you can't do this, do that. And now that we have a big audience, I never hear from them at all.
Success speaks for itself. It's interesting you mentioned that.
It's you and me. I mean, I don't even look for it.
We haven't. But, although, David, to plug ourselves, we're about to get a write-up in the Miami Herald, in the Sun Sentinel, and some random Baltimore. We're just getting going here, David. As Conor McGregor says, I'm not here to take part. We're here to take over.
I like it.
And I always...
Yeah.
And I'm just here for the ride.
No offense to you, David, but I'm going for Joe Rogan's paycheck. But that's just me. But it's funny that you mentioned that. Thank you. By the way, so you mentioned that. You talk about Russia, and it's funny. The first question I was going to ask you: has Putin absolutely lost his mind? Are we seeing vestiges of what we saw in World War II? A lot of comparisons are being made.
I think this is a manifestation of the path he's been on for a decade, right? I think this is the natural progression of someone who is not just narcissistic, but also believes that his vision of what's right is what's right. And that's where you see a reminiscence of what happened in World War II in Germany. And I just would point out that there's a lot of attention that's happening right now with Russia and Ukraine. But in terms of wars, when it's black on black, very rarely does that come up except during the news, and then people watch the genocide and then say, hey, pass the Brussels sprouts. But when it's white on white, and when you've got energy at stake, and when you've got the potential that the United States could not just get involved, but it could impact the citizens, then all of a sudden everyone takes an interest. But these types of wars have been going on for a very long time. But what Putin really misunderstood and underestimated was the resolve, not just of NATO, but of really the entire world, that somehow stood up and said, wait a minute, now you've gone too far. The irony is that he's been going too far for a decade, but now he went too far. And that's what happens when you try to overreach. And I think it's not going to end well for him, but he's got to figure out a way, and we've got to help him figure out a way to stop doing this and back
I'm not
out.
going to hold you to it, and you are not, responsible. But how do you see it ending?
So I think that we have to find a way to make it end where Putin can declare some sort of victory, because it's like when you back a child into a corner and they just start fighting more. You have to help a child get out of that corner, and you don't do that by putting the child further and further in the corner and continuing to try to yell at that child. You give that child an exit strategy, and I think the exit strategy here is, first of all, they can keep Chernobyl, but I think second of all, the exit strategy should be that the sanctions will be lifted and that there will be some sort of agreement for how Ukraine will be recognized as part of NATO, as part of the European community, where he can say it, they're still a part of, quote unquote, Russia and the former USSR. I think some sort of diplomatic solution is what we're going to see, because a solution with guns and missiles is just not something that I think Putin is going to want to see happen.
Right?
You buy that, Karm?
No.
I don't want to. I don't want to.
In World War II, my name is Karmela, not Misha. So in World War II, we were liberated by the Russians in Budapest, where we were hiding, and then when we came back to the little town where I'm from, also the Russians, and I am from what they call Serbia, which is also a Slavic area. So we were very pro-Russian when I was growing up and going to high school there. The point I'm making, the Russians are savages. When they fight in a war, at least in Second World War, it was very obvious that they were unbelievably cruel and very, very tough. Very tough. And they don't withdraw, and all the sanctions in the world will not have an impact on them.
So you don't think Putin would take a diplomatic solution? Is that what you're saying? Or you think
unless they give him something he cannot refuse, like an offer that he cannot refuse.
I think that they'll have to give him something that he may not want to, but that he'll have to take, and he'll have to pretend that it's something that he really needed. But I hear you. I guess I'm also speaking from a standpoint of hope, because I'd like to believe that we learned our lesson after World War I, that there'd never be another World War, and then World War II happened. Now I'd like to believe we've learned our lesson with World War II, that a World War III will not happen. And eventually I'm going to be right. It may not be now. Maybe there has to be a World War III, and it's World War IV that'll never happen. I just don't know the answer, but I'm hopeful that we're done with World War II.
You heard that thing that if World War III happens, World War IV will be fought with stones?
I have heard that, yes.
Very deep.
Do you remember the movie War Games? I bet you do. With Matthew Broderick.
Yes. Yep.
Global thermonuclear war. The best game is not to play.
Yeah, that is definitely true. I remember watching.
Let's talk baseball. I like.
We're going to get into baseball. And so I remember the movie The Day After. It scared the crap out of me. That was like what would happen the day after. I remember watching that
on some beach in Australia or something.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you know why you were scared, though? Do you remember? Because when that movie came out, I believe it was with Jason Robards, but I could be wrong. There were people. It was so realistic that people thought it was actually happening at the time they were watching the movie. I think that's what happened.
I think you might be right about. I remember being terrified, absolutely terrified. You might be right about that. Oh, look at this! Breaking news: Russian oligarch Abramovich trying to sell FC Chelsea right now. I just got an alert. So let's start off with the broader picture here for all our 80-year-old women who are listening to this podcast. Major League Baseball and its players union failed to reach a deal by an MLB-imposed Tuesday deadline. As a result, Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred said he's now canceling opening day and some regular season games. What is going on here? Can you break this down for the mahjong playing women in Miami Beach?
By the way, unfortunately, I don't play mahjong. I took a course just to be certified. Go ahead.
Yes. Sorry. You just did a whole introduction about an MLB labor situation, and the response was, no, you got it wrong. I don't play mahjong. That's what she got out of everything you said. I'm not sure, given that is where our starting point is, I don't think there's anything I could say.
David, do you think you could work your magic and get Karm and I on the CBS Sports Network with our podcast? We're looking for.
You know what? What did I teach you?
Karmela told me to only ask how I can help you. We'll get to that in a minute. But tell us about what's going on. What's going on with Major League Baseball?
So listen, it's pretty simple. There are people who own businesses who want to make more money, and they want to pay their employees as little as possible to make as much as possible. That's it.
This is buy low, sell high.
Welcome to America. So forgive my ignorance. I was a massive, by the way, I'm a huge fight fan, big MMA, big into UFC. I've done a million stories. That's my sport now. I could tell you, Karm, the entire 1978 Yankees roster, top to bottom, but I'll spare you right now. But is this an issue where...
Wait, can I stop you?
Yeah.
100%.
You can name the entire 78 roster?
Yes.
The first general manager who I ever worked with in 1999 with the Montreal Expos, get ready, it was Jim Beattie.
I remember Jim Beattie. I remember the name. Yeah, wow. It's a small world. Amazing.
Okay, sorry. Continue.
No, not at all.
No.
So is this an issue where owners don't want to pay the players? Is that what's going on here? Or is this...
No. Of course they pay the players. They just want to pay them as little as possible.
Right. Okay. And so there's quote unquote a lockout. So how does this get resolved? And what does this do for the game of baseball? I remember, when was the last time this happened? In the early 90s, I remember there being a lockout.
There was a player strike in 1994 that cost the World Series. There was no World Series in 1994. And that's the last time there was a work stoppage. And the reason why the owners locked out the players is so the players wouldn't go on strike. So it was a strategic procedural move back on December 2nd when the agreement that governs the rules between the employer and the employees, or the owner as the employer and the employees, meaning the players, when the agreement expired, the employer's owners said, no more. We are now locking you out. We are shutting down the game until we have another agreement that tells us the rules of how we're going to work together. And they have not been able to come up with another agreement yet. And in December, it didn't matter because there were no scheduled games. But now scheduled games start March 31st. And the reason why the first week of games has been canceled is there's not enough time for the players to get ready to play those games because they're not in what's called spring training, which is like the warm-up to games that matter. And when you can't warm up, you can't play the game. And right now, there's no warming up.
And so this is essentially a game of chicken. Forget Ukraine. How is this going to end? Because let me ask you this. The average 35-year-old American male, do you think he cares more about Ukraine, Russia, or what's going on with MLB?
Oh, I think it's a tie. I think they care more about whether Aaron Rodgers is going to be on the Packers next year.
Yeah.
But the answer is that I think that the way this ends is there'll be a real deadline, which hasn't happened yet, because deadlines are what make agreements. Without a deadline, you don't have an agreement. It's like when you're back in school. If you never got a date by which you had to submit your term paper, you would never write your term paper. If there were never a due date or never an exam date, right, you would just never study. So there has to be a real deadline day, and that day is to be determined. We don't know what that day is, but that will be the last day of this lockout.
Karm, do you care if they play baseball or not this year? Even Dad.
I will say something unbelievably, totally Karmela-like, because I don't know anything about it. But I have the feeling that it's less of a passionate game. Since I came in 1961, I feel that there are fewer people into it than they were then. Then it was really the American sport. And now I feel that it is more like basketball. And am I wrong, or am I making this up?
Well, there's just more. There are more things going on now. I understand what you're saying, but that's like telling me that back in the day we used to use a typewriter, and now people use a computer. Or back in the day there were only 3 television stations, and now there's hundreds of television stations. The world has changed. There are more entertainment options. There are more things for people to do with their time. Baseball is one of the entertainment options. There's no question about it. But I think the bigger economic issue here is that sports content and live sports content is the most valuable content there is. And so as long as you've got live sports content, which is baseball, you will have platforms like ESPN or Turner or MLB Network or CBS or NBC who want to buy that content because they have hours to fill on their platforms where they are responsible to give programming to people like you who pay for those channels. So I'm not worried about the future
I follow
of baseball.
this.
Yeah, Karm,
He has a legal mind. He's a lawyer.
We should really switch into sports. This would be hilarious.
He just gave us the reason for it.
You talking sports would be a home run, and
Instead of having those after the show things, we should have, because I now feel like I'm a semi-expert in this.
You know, David's going to think I'm kissing his ass, which I am a little bit, because I'm going to ask for a favor, maybe,
No,
but not yet.
no.
Karmela's terrified. But he's got like, David, you have like a 1950s radio voice. It's very magnetic. I'm drawn to it. I love it. It's I don't know.
He's straight.
I have a face made for radio.
So there's a little known player, the most beloved Yankee arguably of all time, Derek Jeter. He was brought in by a guy named Bruce Sherman, who, as I understand it, is the current owner of the Miami Marlins. When he was brought in, David Samson, who we were speaking to, was brought out. He was shown the door. And then just last week, I think it was, because I'm losing track of time, Bruce Sherman said, hey, essentially, Derek Jeter, even though he's in the media, it said Derek Jeter stepped down, he was obviously canned for not doing a better job with the Marlins. Did any of this news surprise you, David, as you're the man who filled your shoes is now no longer filling your shoes?
No, because it's much harder than it looks, right? So when he came in, when Derek Jeter took over the Marlins, he thought that everything would get better and there'd be more fans at the games and there'd be a whole lot more revenue. And it just didn't turn out to be the case. He thought there'd be a whole lot more winning on the field and off the field. And it just wasn't the case. And at some point, you can't talk about how bad the guy did before you. You have to start standing on your own 2 feet and saying how well you're doing. And you can't survive just by disparaging people in the past. You actually have to survive by proving to people that you are the future. And he was unable to do that, and that cost him his job.
Jeter said that in so many words that you sucked at your job. How did you take that?
I was taught by my mother that sticks and stones may break your bones, but names will never hurt me.
I told you the same thing. Didn't I tell you the same sticks and stones?
You know what's funny? Every parent in the world says that, but every kid says my mom and dad. Should just be like a blanket statement. But
it's page 4 of the How to Be a Parent manual, right?
Exactly.
Page 1 is tell your kid not to stick their fingers on something hot, right? Page 2 is don't let names hurt you. Don't let yourself be bullied. But I think that we know that bullying happens because there's so many kids who don't learn to have a thick skin. And this is when we get into the situation where we're in now, which is where everyone gets a participation trophy and no kids have any level.
Yeah, hate that. Yeah.
Joel just talked about the participation trophy in regard to his children, his two girls.
So I'm a diehard fight fan, and my girls just started taking jiu-jitsu, the number one defense against sexual assault. And
they are we do 6 and 8.
We do a segment called 3 Questions for Grandma at the end of this podcast, which we tape out of sequential order. So we already did it. The question today was, why do you have to get stripes on your belt instead of just the next belt? And I want these kids to understand, like, you've got to work for your belt. Like, stuff is not just handed to you, you know?
And then you mentioned the participation.
Yes.
I want to ask
I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
We're not teaching people how to deal with adversity. And when you don't teach people how to deal with adversity, by definition, they are not able to handle it and they have thinner skin. And then they're subject to be more upset or become even paralyzed by those who bully them or those who tell them they're not good or not doing a good job or not productive. But I was never that way. I always had a thick skin. It's how I could be the public face of a franchise. People ask me every day, how do you handle being in public so much? How do you handle the things people say about you? And I always say that I'm far more impacted by the people around me who I love and who love me. I'm far more impacted by what they think of me than those who have never met me. Because cyber courage, which means hiding behind a computer screen or typing something on the internet, that is not something that has any impact on my life at all.
Were you like this as a kid?
I was, because I was always short. I was always the last pick in the playground, and I always was able to compete in sports and with my mind. I was always good at everything but great at nothing. And I realized that being good at everything actually gave me great flexibility to surprise people in all sorts of ways, both athletically and intellectually. And I also realized that the biggest skill I had is that my mouth was always behind my brain. And I was surrounded by people whose mouths were ahead of their brain. So they didn't know what they were saying. They couldn't have cogent arguments. They didn't understand the impact of their words. But even as I'm talking to you, or as I do my show every day without a prompter, I do it 45 minutes just off the top of my head. My brain is always ahead of where my mouth is. And that enables me to hopefully be entertaining, be educational, and also understand that what I have to say may not be right, but it is what I have to say, and I'm saying it the way I want to say it.
Where do you think your ambition comes from? I'm always curious. Like, I have this insane ambition and drive, and I don't know why, and I haven't really gotten very far with that. You've gotten much further, but where does it come from?
My ambition has always outstripped my talent, and it's the reason that that's the case is I've always, I've had to work. I was the guy who, I was born on third base, but was always aware that I didn't hit the triple. But at the same time, I worked in college because I wanted extra money, because I wanted to do things that I couldn't afford. During law school, I had no money, so I did extra jobs to have money because I wanted to do things that I wanted to do. So I've had money, I've had no money, but my ambition has never been about money. It's always been about accomplishment. And with accomplishment can come money in many cases, but what really it comes with a level of self-fulfillment, because I don't want to die and look back and say, man, I missed so many opportunities to do something extraordinary. So I rarely say no to things. I try new things. I like having a tummy ache, which means I'm in an uncomfortable situation. I sort of embrace that feeling where I don't know what the outcome's going to be. I embrace failure. And many people are scared of failure. I love it. I have failed so many times I can't even tell you. And I love failing. All of my success comes from the failures I've had. And it's all because I've got the intestinal fortitude to be uncomfortable. So to the extent that I could explain to your audience what gives me my ambition, it's really the ability to understand and appreciate and grow from failure.
Very well said.
Very well. Very well.
By the way, not to minimize what you just said, but is that a textured sport coat you're wearing? Because I really like it.
I don't know what textured means, but it is definitely a sport coat. I wear a sport coat for my show every day. I don't know what textured means. Doesn't every sport coat have a texture?
I don't know. It looks like is there a pattern on it? It's hard to tell. It looks cool.
Joel goes from the micro to the micro, you know?
Macro.
From macro to the
micro.
Yeah, but and then he goes the stupid question about the jacket, which I condemn
She'll
as
yell
a
at
question.
me she'll yell at me for that. Yeah, we're having a deep conversation. Blah 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 blah. Karm, if you're gonna
No.
The key to broadcasting is pretend. Don't.
No,
show
I
the
don't
notes.
know these names. I just wanted
read
to
your
know.
Notes, read your
When
notes.
Jeffrey Loria sold the Marlins, weren't you one of the, because of your position and your being an attorney, weren't you the one who were negotiating that when he sold it to Sherman?
Yes. I was not an owner of the team. I was the president of the team.
Yeah, president, but Loria was.
So what's your question, Karm?
The question is he helps Sherman get in there to then get him out of there.
Karmela is saying that you basically helped sell it to a guy who then canned you. Is that accurate? Sold a team to Sherman, who then got rid of you.
No matter who was going to buy the team, I knew that I was not going to be retained, because people, when they buy something, they want to put their own management in, and they assumed that I was loyal to the previous owner, which I was, but I would have been happy to stay. I wanted to stay. I had a contract to stay, and I was let go, and I was perfectly fine because I won a World Series and got a ballpark built and hosted an all-star game and did all sorts of fun stuff. Finished in last place, traded players, signed players. So after 18 years, I was ready to do something else. And that's part of why my show works, because most people with a microphone who are talking about sports are really just gas bags who have never been in the room where it happens. And if they have been, they want to get back in the room, so they're not willing to actually give you anything juicy or anything interesting. Whereas I'm willing to talk about anything because I've been there, I've done it, and I don't want to do it again because I'm so happy doing nothing personal.
So,
well, you know, this name, Nothing Personal, the
podcast is Nothing Personal with David Samson.
Yeah, but I just listened to the one about Cheater, and you were such a noble soul of, not tearing him apart, even though he was your replacement. And when he was let go, you were explaining the dynamics of what was happening there.
Yeah, I'm not into Schadenfreude. I really don't. I don't need to build myself up at the misfortune of others.
At the cost of other people.
Wish I could say the same about myself.
No, Joel cannot do that.
David,
yet.
what happens?
He's progressing, though.
So what happens to Derek Jeter now? Where does he go from here? Another team will pick him up?
No, he'll never run another team.
No?
He will never be given the keys to a team the way he was given the keys to the Marlins.
Really? So he'll become an entrepreneur a la A-Rod now or something? He'll be on Shark Tank?
He's been that. He's done a bunch of different projects, and I think that he realized that being the public face of a franchise is just not something that interests him anymore. It's too much work and too much criticism, and he's used to not being criticized, and it's tough. Right? Being the public face of a franchise when you're used to being genuflected toward as the greatest shortstop ever, which he wasn't, but certainly a Hall of Fame shortstop, certainly one of the top 10 of all time, I would say, that when you go from that to people who say, I don't care what you did, what are you doing now? That makes it very difficult. And I don't think he'll want to do that again.
Karmela, Brian Flores, Coach Flores, do you know who he is?
No.
Okay, so he was the coach of the Miami Dolphins.
But you switched. Let me tell you something very funny before you go there. I give you this is like the second time in different situations it happened to me. I Googled when I heard that David Samson is going to be here. I Googled the Miami Dolphins instead of the Miami Marlins, because I don't know my derriere from my elbow.
Yeah. David, we had Carol Baskin from Tiger King on, and in preparation for the show, Karmela was Googling The Lion King. And she had never watched or heard of Tiger King, and so she was asking Carol Baskin some strange questions. But
I don't know how I miss so much when I'm like such a...
So David, I know your time is limited, and I want to get through a couple of things real quickly. Brian Flores is the former Miami Dolphins coach.
Right.
He's African-American, minority.
Cheater is too, no?
Yes. He had 2 winning seasons and gets fired, and then turns around and is suing Major League Baseball along with the Dolphins and a few other teams.
Suing the National Football League, not Major League Baseball.
I'm sorry. Correct. National Football League. Slight difference. So what was your take on that? Does he have a case there, especially since you're an attorney?
Yeah, no, he has no case, right? He's alleging he was filing a class action suit alleging racial discrimination. It's going to be really hard to establish a class legally. Now, he's not wrong that teams do sham interviews just to satisfy a rule which says you have to interview minority candidates before you hire a coach or a general manager. And many teams know who they're going to hire, and they just, if they're hiring a white person, they just interview minorities, and it's just for show. And so he does have a point, but it's not a legal point. But it certainly did create a buzz, and it's not a good way to get a head coaching job is to sue every team that you're trying to work for. I had a pretty simple rule when running the Marlins that if you're suing me, I'm not hiring you. It's a pretty simple rule. It's pretty easy for people to understand, and I think it was pretty reasonable. But I think that Brian Flores was trying to make a point that there is systemic racism in football, and he wanted to be the change. He wanted to be sort of the beacon of change going forward. And I thought it was great what he was doing until He interviewed for a job with a football team called the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans ended up hiring someone named Lovey. Lovey is African American. Brian Flores said, "You did not hire me, Brian Flores, because I sued you, and that is a problem because I was the one who should have been hired and not Lovey." What he should have said is, "Congratulations, I'm thankful that another African American has a chance to be a head coach. That was the point of my lawsuit. It was never about me. It was always about giving minority coaches a bigger chance to be a head coach." And that was his moment to show that the lawsuit wasn't about him, and he showed the exact opposite.
How about that thing that he accused the owner of giving him $100,000?
Very good, Karm. That was my very good, Karm. So Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins.
If I spent 2 months, I would become a world expert.
He accused in this lawsuit the owner, a Jewish owner of the Miami Dolphins, Stephen Ross, of offering to pay the coach, Brian Flores, $100,000 a game for every game he lost so that they would have a better draft pick. If that allegation is true, is he going to be able to prove that, David? And if so, what are the ramifications?
Well, there's a difference between tanking and throwing, right? Tanking is when you put a bad product on the field because you want to lose as many games as possible so you can get better with better draft picks. Throwing a game is when you tell players to purposefully miss catches or to purposefully not tackle players on the other side. Throwing a game goes to the integrity of the game, and with so much gambling money out there, that would be a major problem. But tanking, that's something that many teams do because they believe their window to win is not at that moment, so they want to be as bad as possible. I learned a lesson in my 18 years. The only place you don't want to be is in the middle. You either want to be really good or really bad. And so if you're managing your team to be in the middle, you're not managing your team well. So in football, what that means, if you're winning 8 games, which means you're a 500 team, you win as much as you lose, that makes you win no Super Bowls, and it makes you get no high draft picks. So what's the purpose of it?
2 more quick things I want to touch on. I know you got to go. Meyers Leonard, Karmela, do you know who he is?
No.
Center for the Miami Heat, former center, I believe. He is a gamer. Do you know what a gamer is? Plays video games almost professionally, where people pay to watch him play. While he was playing a video game,
he used the profanity.
He used the K word.
You did a podcast on him.
He used the N word for Jews, which is the K word.
So the N word is exactly as valuable major insult as the N word. We should get equality.
The K word, which rhymes with Mike, and then claimed ignorance that he didn't know the word. You had an interesting take on this on your show, which was about cancel culture. What are you, in relation to this, what are your thoughts on cancel culture? Because we hear about it all the time.
Those of us who live with a microphone are always one word away from being canceled, right? And if be careful what you wish for. As your podcast gets more popular, you're going to have to make sure that mom understands that there's certain things that cannot be said, even if they're said by someone who's an octogenarian.
Oh boy, he said.
I need a lawyer.
Oh boy.
You're not going to need a lawyer. You're going to need a different job. But here's the thing: what Meyers Leonard did. I thought that it was impossible for someone not to know that word existed and was an anti-Semitic word. I thought it was impossible that people wouldn't know it. He claimed he didn't, and I didn't believe him, and I called him out on that. I called out the Heat, more importantly, for not releasing him immediately and waiting to strategically release him when it was beneficial to the team.
Whose owner, by the way, is Jewish, Mickey Arison.
And a very, very influential, charitable Jewish person as well. But what Meyers Leonard has done since is everybody who gets caught, right? Like if you get caught cheating on your wife, you go to rehab and say you're a sex addict. If you get caught drunk driving, you say, oh, I've got an addiction problem, I'm going to rehab. Even if you don't believe you do, you say it because it's good PR, you think. So anytime you're caught being a misogynist or being a racist, you say, I'm going to educate myself. I'm going to sit with Jewish groups all over the country, and I'm going to learn why what I said was so insensitive. And I said, blah, blah, eye roll. The minute the cameras turn off, he's going to go back to gaming. But to his credit, Meyers Leonard, since that incident, has spent tons of time with rabbis, with Jewish groups, with people from all sorts of races and backgrounds, and has educated himself. And I give him all the credit in the world for doing that when most people just check the PR box and then move on.
Is he in the league still?
No.
Wow. Because of that, would he still be playing if it wasn't?
No, because he stunk.
Yeah. That's another good reason. Listen, I don't want to end on a negative note, but I think this is important, or a sad note, I should say. You recently did a podcast about your sister. She sadly passed away from lung cancer, I believe.
And she was a non-smoker.
Mm-hmm.
She was a non-smoker.
You say it taught you a lot about facing adversity, which is something I do and most people do on a daily basis. I just feel like I do it a little more than most people.
But you don't know how to face it.
Karm, I think I face it fairly well. But what did this all teach you? And I don't want to minimize it in any way. This is obviously your sister. I mean, how difficult was this for you?
No, there's nothing to minimize. I think that, it's different. I lost my father and my sister in the last year. And the difference is that your sister is the only person in the world. I have several half siblings.
Yeah, the other's a half.
This was my sister, and she's the only one who had institutional knowledge of every part of my life. And when she died, I realized that I would never have anyone again to confirm memories, as an example, or to talk to about shared past experiences. And what it taught me is that my whole view of life and the fleeting existence that we have has been accurate. My whole desire to live and not kill time, and my whole knowledge that every day, it sounds so corny, but every day we're lucky. My sister was perfectly healthy. She got a little cough. She thought she had a cold, and then she was dead. And so it happens like that. And everyone hears stories and says, oh, it'll never happen to me. And it happens to somebody all the time. And so I just want, at my funeral, when I die, I won't want people to say, oh man, he got cheated. I want people to say, wow, he lived, whether I live to be 120 or whether I get diagnosed or hit by a cab in New York City tonight. I think that living life to the fullest, going back to our talk about being uncomfortable, going back to the way you need to act on a daily basis to be a mensch, I think all of that matters. It doesn't mean you can't be a killer business person. It doesn't mean you can't have ambition. It doesn't mean you can't be competitive, but it means that you have to understand why you're doing the things you do and make sure that you are honoring the way you want to be. Because at the end of the day, life is not a dress rehearsal. This is pretty much the only show in town.
David, your enthusiasm is contagious. You've gained 2 new fans here. I'll be honest.
I feel the same way. It's funny.
I lost my roots, my passion for baseball. I mean, I'm still a fan, and I watch the playoffs. But you've gained a new fan. By the way, my dad grew up in the Bronx, was born in '33, and him, don't tell anyone, and as he says, his kid brother used to jump the turnstile, not pay the nickel, and then pay, I think he said it was like 25 cents for bleacher seats at Yankee Stadium in 1930, whatever.
And he had all the balls, and his mother threw them out.
David, I'm not allowed to end any podcast without asking the guest, how can I help you?
Just keep doing what you're doing. I think that having alternative content, which is what I provide and what you provide, I think it's amazing that you're involving your mother. I think that my mother, if she found out about your podcast, would be jealous at the amount of time that you two spend together, because she always wants me to spend more time with her. And I always feel guilty when I don't. And for people who want to hear about sports, culture, entertainment, or just want to smile from every day, you can listen to Nothing Personal with David Samson. You can watch me if you want to see a nice punum. You can watch me on YouTube, and just go be you. Just be you, and don't worry about the haters. Don't worry about the people who say it can't be done, because they're just trying to make it that they can feel better about not doing it themselves.
Just make sure that you and your mom subscribe on YouTube. You can walk her through how to subscribe. And then, I hear you're buddies with Dan Le Batard, if I'm saying that correctly. So he's another interesting character.
Maybe we should have his mother on.
Man, David, maybe we'll get your mom on next. That would be an interesting guest.
I would say that she would probably say no. She's not really been in public, so I'm not sure that she would want to do that. But I would tell
Let
you
me
that.
tell you something for the record. I haven't been in public. I am very proud. This is the first, a year ago during COVID, he proposed to me to do a podcast. And turns out I like it. I call it getting out of the nursing home, which is the condominium.
I love that.
David, come have lunch with us one day at the Blue and Green Diamond here in Miami Beach. You're welcome. You're welcome.
I appreciate the offer. It's been a pleasure to meet you both, and thank you so much.
And thanks for giving of your time.
Thanks. We'll be right back with a new schmooze. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back. It's time for the news schmooze.
Maybe I'll have to develop new gesturing things.
Karm, you work on your gestures. We're back.
Because I'm not supposed to.
Karm, I forgot to ask, before we went on air, it drives me crazy because I was lecturing you about speaking into the mic, and your question is, how does my hair look? You're just like my wife. You don't care about the substance, you care about your hair. I never, before I go on air, I do not look in the mirror.
Because you like that disheveled artist look.
And by the way, it drove me, I did a story the other day, a great story about a Ukrainian mom who had to walk like close to 20 miles with her baby.
And her luggage.
And her luggage. And I do this story, I put it together, throw it together, and my photographer, whose name I won't mention, forgets to tell me that my wire is protruding at a bizarre angle, and you can see my entire IFB, my earpiece, which drives me crazy. But so what did you think of David Samson?
Joe, this is like in reverse. Usually I give it away as a secret, the secret that we already saw him. And now today we are going backwards I never even met the guy. I think he's wonderful. He's articulate. I saw some of his podcasts.
We have not interviewed him yet. We're doing this out of chronological order, so it was a trick question for Karm, but you thought he was great.
Oh, I like this new gesticulation on the side.
You thought he was great, Karm. David Samson.
Yes, terrific.
Yeah,
really a wonderful guy.
What was the favorite thing that he said of yours today?
He had so many unbelievable quotes that I don't even know which one. Let me think about it.
Do you see how well Karmela lies? Because we have not interviewed him. This is what she does to me in real life. Okay, on to the news schmooze. Russian forces, we are in the middle of this war, even though this will come out probably a week after this news, but Russian forces on Tuesday damaged Babi Yar. You know what that is, Karm?
Yeah, that was killing me. In a previous interview with Dara Horn,
we talked about it.
We talked about it, and I mentioned that there was a famous Russian poet who made a very touching long poem about Babi Yar. At that time, the Russians made beautiful points about Babi Yar, and now they are destroying the museum with all the evidence.
So Russian forces damaged Babi Yar. It's one of Europe's most prominent Holocaust memorials during a brutal onslaught of Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, which used to be Kiev, but that is the Russian pronunciation. So now the entire world is pronouncing it Kyiv. Now this damage quickly drew international condemnation. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his chief of staff said the Russian military had bombed a nearby radio tower that killed 5 people and damaged the Holocaust memorial. And he tweeted, Zelensky, who is a Jew himself and the child of Holocaust survivors. Grandchild of Holocaust survivors, tweeted out, to the world, what is the point of saying never again for 80 years if the world stays silent when a bomb drops on the same site of Babi Yar, at least 5 killed, history repeating? Do you agree with that?
No. I think that the tower was probably too close.
Do you think it was intentional in any way?
Very honestly, I don't.
You think Putin gives a crap about a Holocaust memorial?
I think that he didn't want to bring that into the mix also. I think he would have rather avoided our comments now and the news that he bombed it.
And now this is interesting. Connected but different. Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid said Monday his office had helped 4,000 Israelis leave, as you would say, Ukraine since Russia invaded last week. He says, we will do everything to not leave any Israeli behind or any Jew behind, told reporters that. Many of the Israelis repatriated were members of the Arab minority who make up 20% of the Jewish state's population. A student who identified himself only as Hussein described a harrowing escape from the war zone. For 4 days, we've been sleeping in staircases and train stations. We had a really difficult time without food. I was in Ukraine, as you would say, Karmela, in Kharkiv. It's the last year of my studies, but now I left everything to return. Uda Abu Sayed, whose son Muhammad returned on the flight, said she had been terrified for his safety. What does it say about Israel that it's helping its Arab citizens who professors at Northwestern think that the Israelis are poisoning with gas, that the Israelis are actually helping them repatriate and escape Ukraine?
I am not going there. You know, my stepfather used to say that Jews always have to bring the Jews into all discussions. Like, if you talk about an elephant, you have to say the elephant and the Jews. No, I'm not going there.
Karmela, I did that entirely for you because
I am very, very grateful that you thought this would be my topic.
You're a big Zionist, so
No, but there is something different that's very interesting. The Russians are in Ukraine, and I read something very...
Can you say Ukraine, or you have to say
Never
Ukraine?
Never mind.
How do you say it Hungarian?
Ukraina in Serbian.
And how do you say it Hungarian?
Ukraina.
Ukraine. That's why you say Ukraine.
Anyway, it's a very important thing for the morale of a country that when a soldier is killed, you don't leave him rotting on the battlefield. You take him back to your country for burial. And there are rumors, I don't know if it's propaganda or what it is, that the Russians now, the way they are disorganized in some way, they are leaving Russian soldiers all over Ukraine, and they're not taking them out of the country.
Karmela.
What has that got to do with the price of rice in China?
Did I mention that you can get shirts and hats soon on survivingthesurvivor.com?
Yeah, that's how we're going to get rich.
Okay. Last story. I decided I'm going to start to include stories that I am covering here in Miami as part of my third day job for CBS News here in Miami. And last night, I covered an interesting rally in Miami Beach, the heart of the gay community, one of the gay communities in South Florida. There's a bill currently making its way through the state legislature here called the Don't Say Gay Bill. It's not the actual name, but that's what it's become known as, the Don't Say Gay Bill. And essentially, what it says is that for kids in K through 3, they are not allowed to speak about any kind of sexual orientation, straight to
issues of sexual orientation.
Any issues of sexual orientation, none. But it's targeted toward the gay, lesbian community. In other words, if you have two mothers, let's say, for example, I was married to a lovely man with a nice thick beard, and Vida went to school, and someone said to her, Vida, how come...
Second grade.
And someone said, Vida, how come your father's husband has such a beautiful dark beard? They would not be allowed to discuss that at all. They would be directed to ask their parents for information. And
listen, I didn't see the law. You didn't see the law. The law is that you don't.
That is not where it ends.
I know that where it ends.
No.
That it was left open, the upper limit of age, so it could go all the way to high school.
Correct. So they left it also open-ended. It said, or where otherwise age-appropriate issues surrounding this. And that or in the law, in the legalese, leaves it open to interpretation for kids all the way through high school. So if someone is in high school and they know that they are gay or lesbian or transgender, they cannot bring that issue up. Now,
They cannot bring it to school.
They cannot bring it to school. Now, school is supposed to be a safe haven and a place of education. What do you think of all this, Karmela? Because you had a surprising reaction, and I don't want to, no pun intended, out you here. But you seem to agree in a weird way with this bill.
I think they should put an age limit on it. But when they ask an 8-year-old, do you want to be a girl or a boy? And the little boy says, I want to be a girl because the sister got a new bicycle or something. Totally rational. And then the school...
This is not that. This is kids who are identifying as a completely different gender. I profiled a little kid named Cooper. Since 2 years old, he's been dressing as a girl. He says that
no,
he feels
this is not
comfortable.
limited to that. It's all... Anyway,
What happened to your...
my liberal views.
What
I
happened to your
have
liberal
tremendous...
views? What happened to your...
I have tremendous liberal views, but let me now specify it because I don't want...
I'm so tired from working so many hours and being woken up by my child. What happened to your sensitivity?
Let me say something.
You become like a callous older woman.
He's trying
What if you had a grandchild who was transgender?
I wouldn't want the school to decide what to do with that child.
But hold on, that's a different argument.
No. Wait a second. It's not I even when we had the private discussion, which you shouldn't bring up on the podcast.
Well, I always will.
Oh, then I cannot say anything anymore.
Yeah.
I felt that as long as they're discussing little children, because now it's specified up to third grade, they shouldn't. If they say, "Could I have a penis?" The little girl says, then they would say, "You have to ask your mommy and daddy. This is not for the school." But I would cut it at the high school level or junior high school level when, let's say, parents are judgmental or prejudiced, and the child has nowhere to turn and turns towards the school. I think there should be an age limit on it. But don't worry, whatever I say, this being a conservative state, they will vote it in anyway.
100% getting voted in. DeSantis, the governor of the great state of Florida, has already indicated that he is going to sign this into law, the so-called Don't Say Gay bill. The parents of this
who were
young
demonstrating.
Yeah, and this young child, Cooper, he's what is known as gender nonconformist. So he identifies as a boy. He is a boy, but he says he likes to dress as a girl. He says,
well,
quote, unquote,
I know cases like that from my past.
He says that that's his quote unquote style. But in 2022, when we have a war in Ukraine and we got high schools getting shot up and we've got issues with the economy, we got to worry about a kid who thinks he's gay. And part of this bill, by the way, a big part of this bill, which has since changed because of the outcry, was going to force teachers to out students. So, in other words, if a student came up to them in confidence and said, I am gay, please don't tell my parents.
Oh my God.
They were going to force them to be outed. That's normal?
No, but they didn't put it in the law.
It was in the law until about a week ago.
Well, a week ago somebody was alive who is today dead.
Well, so I interviewed this family, and the sister turns out is a lesbian who was a teacher, and she quit her teaching job here in Florida because of this Don't Say Gay bill that's about to become law. And I said flat out, what do you think of these legislators? And she said, who are sponsoring this bill? And you know what she said? She said, I think they're gay, and I think they've got their own homophobic issues. One of the greater sound bites I've ever gotten, and I put that in my piece.
Bravo. Anyway, I am still a bleeding liberal, and I still believe that I love the gays because they are another persecuted minority.
Like the Jews.
Like the Jews.
Karm, what do you think of Dave Samson? It's interesting.
Joel, we did this already.
We'll be right back with 3 questions for Grandma.
It's time now for 3 questions for Grandma.
I noticed you speaking slowly.
speaking slowly and I'm speaking a lot because today we are doing this show in a different order because of a time constraint issue.
Joel, we'll go out and talk to the people. They'll offer you a joint or something.
Karm, we're in a real like hippie
area of
creator studio, which I kind of love.
Some of my friends would love it too, like Janet.
Karm, what about Rita Dunsky? Shout out to her. Does she listen to this?
I don't think she has the time.
Janet does, right? She doesn't have the time. She's 85 and does nothing.
Works full time. She's 82. She works full time as an architect.
She still does?
Absolutely.
Is she ever going to retire?
No. When they carry her out.
You think she'll die working?
Yeah.
She doesn't want to retire?
Oh, she loves what she's doing.
Does she still smoke?
Like a chimney.
At 82?
Yes.
What do you think that is? Do you think she just has a genetic disposition to not get cancer? How many cigarettes?
Let's change the subject.
How many cigarettes do you think she smoked in her?
Who said she doesn't have cancer?
How many cigarettes do you think she has smoked in her lifetime, if you had to guess?
I tried when I was a roommate.
No, but if you had to guess, she's been smoking since what year?
From teenage years.
So, and she's 82. So let's say...
Not everybody had... I swear... Don't aggravate me.
No, but she's smoking, let's say, from 16 to 82. How many years is that?
But she has cancer.
Oh, she does?
Yes.
Lung cancer?
No, lymphoma.
Yeah, is she okay?
She's okay. That's a miracle that she's okay. And another friend just got lymphoma who never smoked.
Why doesn't she have lung cancer,
Another friend, you know, Roy's childhood friend, the wife, never smoked. She got.
We need to bring back This Week in Dead and Dying.
At least the deathly illnesses that didn't kill us.
Is she dying anytime soon, you think, Rita? From cancer?
No, from old age, like all of us.
But that brings me back to my other question. If she started smoking at 16 and she's 82, how many years is that?
It's a lot of years. I'm not doing math.
Hold on, I am. That's 4.
Joel is not 20, good at math.
20. That's 64 years.
I'm not.
That's
people will
years.
get bored with it. We'll
66
we'll
years.
Finish it
How
up.
many cigarettes a day you think she's smoking? 66 years.
She now smokes with a long wooden filter or something.
God bless my friend Karm in Korea. He started smoking with his mother in her bed when he was 8 years old. And he still smokes, I think. Okay, on to 3 questions for Grandma. Here we go. First question from Vita.
That's Carmen in Highland Park?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Been smoking since he's 8 years old. Shout out to Karm in Korea. He has a salon called Haven in Highland Park and Halo in Metuchen, which I don't know if he still owns, but awesome salons. You know what they call this in news, what we're doing right now?
Killing time.
It's called, but there's a word for it. It's called vamping. So sometimes you'll get a producer in your ear and they'll say, I need you to vamp. And that means you got to just talk. But I don't know what the word vamp comes from. If anyone knows.
Like a vampire?
Let us know. I don't think so. On to 3 questions for Grandma. First question comes from Vita Aaliyah at 5 this morning when I was seeing triple and thought I wanted to vomit. Why in jiu-jitsu, which by the way, my daughter started practicing jiu-jitsu, the number 1 defense against sexual assault that there is, they started practicing jiu-jitsu here at one of the great gyms in Miami, the Valente Brothers Gym. Shout out to them. They want to know, why in jiu-jitsu do you get stripes and not a new belt straight away? Let me explain this to you, Karmela. So there's a white, a yellow, a green, purple, brown, black.
Black belt is the best.
The best. But they want to know why you don't go just from white right to yellow, but instead you get stripes on your white belt before you get to yellow. Do you know why?
Probably to have more requirements to get from.
Because nothing is easy in life, Karm. You just don't get belts handed to you. That's why.
And Vida would love a black belt right
now. You
don't
just get a black belt. You get your stripes. You have to work on it. And let me tell you something. These ain't participation stripes, like participation trophies. To become a black belt in jiu-jitsu, it usually takes a minimum of 10 years.
By the way, I have a sad parenthesis, and I have to mention it.
What?
They really gave a horrible, horrible punishment to Putin. They took off his honorary president of the Judo Association of the world from him. Do you think he gives a damn?
You think he sleeps well at night?
I think he does.
I don't think he's sleeping that well anymore. He did, I think, but not anymore. BJ Penn, who's a former UFC fighter, his nickname was, all fighters have nicknames. His nickname was the Prodigy. He's actually running for governor of Hawaii right now. I fear that he has CTE. By the way, there's another story I should have brought up in News Schmooze. Remind me to tell you it in 2 seconds because it's really interesting. But anyway, BJ Penn got his black belt.
People will switch off. They will die
from
boredom.
This is interesting. BJ Penn got his black belt in 3 years. He's one of the only person anyone knows who's able to get a black belt that soon. 3 years.
In what?
In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
Unheard of.
Okay.
Here's a side note, and we'll get back to 3 questions for Graham. I want to get your take on this. There is arguably the best UFC heavyweight of all time. He's a Mexican-American. His name is Cain Velasquez. He was a 2-time, I believe, UFC heavyweight champion. He got arrested for attempted murder a day ago. And he's also known for being a super sweet. He's one of the scariest looking dudes. He's got a big tattoo right here that says Brown Pride because he's a Chicano. And, but he's a gentle giant. And he got arrested for attempted murder. He shot someone, the person's going to live. And everyone's like, what's going on? My immediate first reaction was he's got CTE, brain trauma, and something was going not right. It turns out that the reporting says his own child, he found out, had been molested more than 100 times at this daycare facility, which, if you know Cain Velasquez and you are molesting his child, you have a death wish. So what happened was this guy was arrested, the guy who was accused of the molestation, and then was apparently in the middle of the day driving with his father. And Cain Velasquez found them and shot the father. Father's going to survive. But now everyone on Twitter is like, #free Cain. Like, this guy deserved it. And let me tell you something. Someone molested my... First of all, Cain Velasquez...
I know you would kill them.
But Cain Velasquez doesn't need a gun. This guy is an assassin with his hands and body. He's like a killer. 2 questions. Why do you think he used the gun and not just beat the crap out of these guys with his hands? And number 2, if someone molested your own child, should there be legal recourse to take the law into your own hands?
No, there should never be a legal recourse to take the law in your hand.
What, are you Ben Ferenz?
I am. I was thinking of him. I swear to you
Ben
while I was
Ferenz
saying.
is the last living prosecutor of the Nuremberg trials.
Nobody.
Who said law, not war. Law, not war was his motto.
No, but I think he didn't kill them with his hands because he knows how to fight, and fighters are not murderers.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that might be it. Also, I think it might be the fact that he was chasing them. They were driving away from him. And so he's like, you know what? I'm just going to shoot these bastards instead of trying to
Joel, you should always switch off your phone.
I had my phone off, but I had to take a call the other day, which is why it's on vibrate. But no, back to...
Are you enjoying this vibrate?
Let me ask you this. Do you have any... I don't know. I can't think. Words don't come to me. I think it's the beginning stages of Alzheimer's. I really do.
Don't joke.
I'm not joking.
Okay. Let's go to the...
No. I mean, do you think that he's going to face the full, the long arm of the law, as they say, or do you think you do?
Yes.
You don't think the court of public opinion will help him?
No.
Well, you know what? Free Cain. I'm on Cain's side. Love you, Cain, like a brother.
Maybe a governor will pardon him.
Love you, Cain, man. If you need me, I'm here. On to question number 2. This comes from the lovely Vita. And I think this is about my wife or you. I'm not sure which one. Why do boys have beards, but girls like mommy? Oh, I guess it's about Yana. Why do boys have beards, but girls like mommy just have little hairs over their lip?
Haha, it wasn't I. Because I have a beard and a mustache like daddy.
Answer?
We all have male hormones too.
Okay, beautiful. On to the third question. Third and final question for 3 questions for Grandma. Why... This is from the great CZ, 6 years old. Why, when the fan is not moving, you see the blades. But when you put it on fast, it looks like it has lost its blades.
This is totally a brilliant question. And I think I know why.
What is the
It's
answer?
like the film. When you see the film, and it's like there are little pictures in each. But when you move it fast, your brain blends one into the other from the speed. And what do you think of the motion pictures? How do they work? Those little films?
Yeah, or like a flip book when you flip through it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The speed and your brain, the way your brain processes it, it creates this motion. And you cannot see each individual blade anymore. They all blend into each other.
Karm, let me ask you.
Gee, I know more than I think I know.
Karmela, let me ask you a question, please.
What?
Do you did you at any point thank Hashem, the man above, God, for allowing your husband to come out of surgery and be okay? Or did you ignore that? Did you say any thanks? Would your week have been different if your husband did not make it out of surgery?
Wouldn't have been good.
No.
I can't even fathom it. Being an optimist. No.
Meanwhile, as a side note to that, so
he had a heart valve replaced.
Good old Roy had a heart valve replacement, and I got a text about 2 days later that says, "Dad died," and I had an absolute heart attack. It was a text from my sister, but it turned out it wasn't my sister. It was my wife who was telling me a dad died at 47 years old at the local
school,
not a beach club. And I read it as though it was from my sister, and my dad died. So I got a taste of what it's like to find out that your dad died. My heart dropped into my feet. Very uncomfortable feeling. It's kind of like the time when Ileana was pregnant and I walked in for the ultrasound, and within 10 seconds, the technician goes, "Congratulations, you're having a boy." And goes, "Oh, sorry, my bad. That's a vagina." I forget what they said was.
But
like
that
penis.
was one of your daughters?
Yeah, it was Zizi. They told me it was a boy. And they said, I forget what. Oh, it was the umbilical cord. They're like, "No, that's the umbilical cord. It's a vagina." And I broke down crying. Then I got my son, Judah. All right.
And tell you, your best deal was Zizi.
Yeah, be careful saying that. Did you see video of them watching the podcast?
No, what I mean is that instead of having penis, it was a girl. That's what I meant.
Okay. They are now watching our podcasts.
Oh my God, they are lying in bed and they're watching the podcast. And when we mention them, they're like very happy.
You know, when I was a kid, I thought
somebody's watching our podcast.
When I was a kid, I thought my dad was a hero because he wrote a book. And my kids go around telling everybody, not that I'm on CBS News, but that my daddy's a quote unquote YouTube star. And that so is grandma. So they're excited.
Yeah. You never know what happens next.
Any final thoughts for this great podcast?
Well, we are in the new studio, and these are different things. If I don't talk right into it and swallow it, then you can't hear me. So I have a stiff neck because I can't turn my neck.
By the way, the lighting in here is beautiful. You see the backlighting? It's like a pinkish purple, beautiful. Nice studio. I like it.
It's
and we've
very
switched spots
hippie.
And you're talking into the mic. So, Karm?
How do you know I'm talking in?
Because I can hear you on my headset.
Okay.
All right, now we've officially bored everyone. Love you.
Love
we'll
you.
see you next week,
We
America.
succeeded where others have failed.
Love you, America.